So for those of you who know me, I intentionally did not put myself as an item on this agenda because if you'll notice that we started this process over 6 years ago, and so you would be here for the rest of your afternoon, but at least it's air conditioned. Steve was remiss in speaking to how involved he has been in this process, and if it weren't for Steve, I do not think we would be here today. So I would like to recognize Steve. Say just a few other shout outs that I want to make, and one is to someone who I have respected since I moved to Lawrence and who has taught me, although he probably doesn't know it, a lot of things, and that is Bill Tuttle. And he was kind enough to write the text for the markers, and trust me, you cannot believe how many eyes have been laid on this text. And he withstood all and was such a kind and generous donator to the city of Lawrence. I just want to make sure that we recognize him as well. And then, of course, none of us would be here, and he gets his own piece on the program to talk to you a little bit about his journey. But Chris Rice, the brother of Nick Rice, is the one that actually started our kind of adventure down this road of Lawrence history. And if it weren't for Chris and his gumption and pushing Lynn with the email saying, I know it's hard, but let's keep going, we also wouldn't be here today. So I do want to recognize Chris right off the bat for taking the time and the effort to work with a city employee that doesn't have resources and a lot of ability to do wonderful things like this program. And I will say, Steve mentioned a little bit, sometimes history's hard, and it just is, but it doesn't mean that we shouldn't take accounts of what happened and try to educate ourselves on all sides. There are members of the community who are not supportive of these markers, and I want to invite them in to this process and to look at the markers. And as we make that QR code robust with lots of documentation and lots of information, I would like for the entire community to take this opportunity to not maybe focus on the negative and tragedy of these two events, but also to look at us as Lawrencians and see how we've grown, and that we are looking at the hard history as well as the perfect history and trying to make a better place for our children and grandchildren. And so I will quit going on, but it is my great pleasure to introduce to you the mayor of the city of Lawrence, Brad Finkeldye, who's going to give us a few comments.
Good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all for being here, especially to the Rice and Dowdell families whose love and patience and fidelity have made this day possible. We are honored to stand with you as we dedicate these educational markers and recognize two young men whose lives ended far too soon. I'm humbled to be here today. Rick Tiger Dowdell and Harry Nick Rice were products of Lawrence and Overland Park, but they shared something profound. They were both just beginning adulthood. They were freshmen in college. They were sons and brothers, classmates, teammates, friends, and members of communities that deeply loved them. They were both working to make their world a better place. Today, we remember the many circles of peoples whose lives they touched, from the family members, fellow students at Lawrence High, Shawnee Mission South High School, and the University of Kansas, to St. Luke AME Church, the Country Club Christian Church, the Zeta Beta Tau Fraternity, and countless other community groups, friends, and loved ones who have carried their memories for more than 5 decades. These markers are not simply about remembering how Rick and Nick died. They're about remembering how they lived, who they were, and the people who loved them. They invite all of us to pause, to learn, and to better understand this chapter of Lawrence's history. I would also want to recognize the many people who have made this project possible. First, as mentioned, the families of both these young men. Tiger and Nick's families never ever gave up. The families have worked for decades to carve out honorable spaces in our community so that others can learn from the teachings inherent in these tragedies. You have presented context, you've submitted in both academic and community spaces, and you have persevered, and we want to thank you for that. Also, thank you to the members of the working group, the Historic Resources Commission, the Watkins Museum city staff, historian Bill Tuttle mentioned, Steve Nowak mentioned, Lynn, for all that you've done over the past 5, almost 6 years to make this happen. I'd also like to express my gratitude to the Jeff Hatfield families, whose gift, monetary gift, allowed these markers to be developed and produced. As a community, we cannot change the past, but we can choose to remember it honestly, learn from it, and ensure that future generations understand both the pain and the resilience that have shaped Lawrence. Our collective memories are best preserved when we gather, like we're doing today, to share our stories and perspectives. May these markers serve as places of remembrance, reflection, and conversation for years to come. And may we continue building community where every young person has the opportunity to know that they belong in Lawrence. Thank you, and the community thanks you. Thank you.
So as many of you know, we put this together kind of in a rush because when we finally got the marker text approved and we finally got everything done, and for the past 6 years in the back of my mind, it was like, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay for this? How am I going to pay for this? Everybody knows what a budget crunch it is. And then one day I got this wonderful email that said, Lynn, I want to pay for these markers, my family, and I think this is important history. And so I'm very thankful to the mayor for bringing the Jeff Hatfield family for their kind, unsolicited donation to allow this project to move forward and for us to have these important markers in our community. Now it gives me great as a historian, when I decided to move to Lawrence, Kansas many years ago, I did what all historians do, and I started digging into the history of Lawrence, Kansas. Is this someplace I want to be? And one of the books that came to my attention for me to use was called This is America, the 60s in Lawrence, Kansas, that was published in 2002. And I will tell you that it made a true impact on me and my decision to move here and become part of this community. Right now, it is my pleasure to introduce to you the author of that book, Dr. Rusty Monholland, who has recently retired from the Kansas Board of Regents, where he served as the Vice President for Academic Affairs. He is returning to Kansas before he had that post. He was at the South Carolina Commission on Higher Education from 2019 to 2024 as their executive director. He's also served as the Assistant Commissioner for Academic Affairs at the Missouri Department of Higher Education and was an Associate Professor of History and Director for the Masters of Arts and Humanities program at Hood College in Frederick, Maryland. He previously held academic appointments at Washburn University, Friends University, Rockhurst University, and of course, our beloved University of Kansas. And he also did a little time at the University of Missouri, Columbia, but that's all right. Prior to, and this is what totally fascinated me when I first started researching Dr. Monholland, was that before he came to academia, he worked as a welder. Wow. And in a fabrication shop. And so someday I'm definitely going to coffee to find out how you make that switch to history and political science. But I do want to mention that he is a native Kansan, And he did start taking those college courses, and he actually got his bachelor degree at Washburn University with honors, and then ultimately his master's and doctoral degree also with honors from the University of Kansas. This is America was published, as I mentioned, in 2002, and it received the Edward H. Tien Publication Award from the Kansas State Historical Association. He is also the author of Baby Boom, People and Perspectives, published by ABC Clio in 2010. Dr. Mulholland is a thoughtful and compelling storyteller whose work invites readers to look closely at the country we call home. In This is America, he blends sharp observation with a deep sense of humanity, capturing the voices, moments, and complexities that define everyday life across the nation. His writing challenges, inspires, and encourages readers to reflect on where we've been, where we're going, and what it truly means to be part of the American story. Dr. Mulholland.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Lynn. That was about the nicest introduction I've ever gotten, aside from the one I got when I met my wife here 30-some years ago. Lynn mentioned this book came out of my doctoral dissertation, and I'd like to extend my thanks to my mentor, Bill Tuttle. If it is everything that you said it was in that passage, I think most of that credit goes to Bill. And as we were moving back, I still have the original manuscript that is quite red, actually, from Bill's pen, but he certainly helped me make it a compelling book, and for that I thank you, Bill. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today. I'm really pleased to be here to provide some background and context for the events that took place in July of 1970 here in Lawrence. As I will draw upon the research I did first for my dissertation and then my book, This is America, Lawrence, Kansas in the 1960s. Oh, I got it. It is advancing it here. See if this works.
There we go.
On July 16, 1970, Rick Tiger Dowdell, a 19-year-old lifelong resident of Lawrence, was shot and killed by Lawrence police officer William Garrett following a car chase involving the two men. 4 days later, near where today stands the University of Kansas Alumni Center, Nick Rice, a student at KU, white and also 19 years old, died after being shot by Lawrence Police Department officers in riot gear who were attempting to disperse a crowd gathered and angry over Dowdell's death. Between July 16th and the end of the month, Lawrence literally teetered on the brink of a civil war. These deaths were not isolated incidents, nor were they unrelated. Both occurred within the context of a community racked by more than a decade of social and political activism, both on campus and in the streets of Lawrence. And that activism increasingly became more confrontational and violent. Civil rights activism in Lawrence since 1960 had evolved from direct action efforts to integrate places of public accommodation and to obtain equal housing, educational, and job opportunities to blacks, to an Afrocentric cultural and political movement called Black Power, which empowered many blacks, but also alienated many whites. Similarly, students at the University of Kansas who early in the decade protested against dorm closing hours, in loco parentis, and racial exclusion in university housing, by 1970 were defiantly taking to the streets of Lawrence to oppose the Vietnam War. Lawrence had also become a haven to an alternate culture of self-styled street people and freaks seeking to escape from or destroy corporate middle-class America. In response to these developments, police surveillance and narcotic busts increased, straining further an already fragile and tenuous relationship between the Lawrence Police Department and blacks, students, and the street people. Many longtime Lawrence residents were appalled at what they saw as the disintegration of their community. Some of them formed a grassroots anti-communist movement in response, while others used existing civic organizations to protest against, for example, the growth of the federal government, the extension of the welfare state, and legislation such as the Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts. Lawrence in 1970 had about 45,000 residents, and it certainly was not a sprawling urban area. Unlike the industrial urban north, Lawrence really didn't endure the economic dislocations of industrialization, the loss of jobs, or the flight to the suburbs that were central to civil disturbances and social unrest in other American communities. Race relations in Lawrence were hardly comparable to the Jim Crow South. There was no legal segregation, but there was rampant discrimination in housing, education, and employment. There also existed blatant racism. Because of the baby boom, the university's enrollments and Lawrence's population and physical boundaries also increased throughout the decade. Additionally, Lawrence has a free state heritage born of the violence of bleeding Kansas during the sectional crisis of the 1850s, and that's still resonating. Some have called this the John Brown legacy, and it attracted many people, especially the young, to the community to join the struggle for freedom and equality. This legacy was perhaps most evident in the Black freedom struggle. Black Lawrencians had struggled for more than a century in Lawrence to gain equal access to the town's social and economic life. And especially after World War II, they fought to end racial exclusion in public accommodations and improve housing and employment opportunities for blacks in Lawrence. In 1960, activists picketed the Jayhawk Plunge, a privately owned swimming pool that admitted white non-members to swim, but denied black Lawrencians to enter the premises. The picket generated much publicity, but it did not ultimately force the owner of the pool to integrate the pool. As it was privately owned, many of Lawrence residents came to the defense of the owner, saying she had the right to exclude whomever she wanted from swimming there. Lawrencians generally were apathetic about the protesters and their goals. Undeterred, activists continued their efforts, and in 1969, after at least 4 previous failures, the citizens of Lawrence voted to issue bonds to construct a municipal swimming pool open to all. The vote was close and not without controversy and hints of violence. And a key factor in the bond campaign was the growing dissatisfaction and anger of many young African Americans with the pace of social change in their community. A community already divided along racial lines polarized further between 1960 and 1970. And by 1970, threatened to spill over into racial violence. Another civil rights protest took place on campus in 1965 when KU students who had been protesting racial exclusion and discrimination in campus housing sat down in Chancellor Clark Wesco's office. They demanded the elimination of racial exclusion from all university-approved housing, including fraternities and sororities. They wanted the University Daily Kansan to stop accepting racist advertisements for housing, and they wanted the creation of a University Human Relations Council to hear and rule on grievances. Chancellor Wesco had the 100 or so protesters arrested, although he also offered to post their bail. But in the days after their release, they continued to protest. The sit-in ended a few days later after the Student Government Association approved some legislation that essentially met all of the protest goals. This demonstration easily, in my mind, was the most successful civil rights protest ever in Lawrence, but in many ways it was a hollow victory. Racial exclusion had been removed from the campus through this legislation, but racism lingered, permeating the campus and the community. One individual I interviewed doing my research recalled that as she walked across campus, a group of young white men in blackface hurled racial epithets at her from the back of a truck. These all too frequent experiences, coupled with repeated failures to build a municipal swimming pool and the continued white resistance to racial equality, led many young African Americans to embrace the ideas of Black Power. The Black Power movement in Lawrence was embodied in the Black Student Union, formed by KU students in 1968. Black Power encouraged African Americans to take control of their own lives and build their own institutions. Although it was a powerful political and cultural force for African Americans, whites in Lawrence saw Black Power as a threat, potentially a violent threat, to them and, as they said, their way of life. Like issues of race, the Vietnam War also polarized the community. Peaceful protests against the Vietnam War dated back to at least 1963. But by the end of the decade, anti-war activism had become confrontational and akin to performative street theater, directed at symbols of American militarism in such entities as the Reserve Officers Training Corps, ROTC, on campus. The Military Science Building at KU, for example, was firebombed in February of 1969, and on many other occasions was the target of rocks, bricks, and other attacks. In April, student protesters waved toy guns in the faces of ROTC cadets during an awards presentation. In May, students and faculty disrupted the annual Chancellor's Review of ROTC, taunting the cadets and forcing the cancellation of the event. That October of 1969, in concert with the nationwide Vietnam moratorium, some 4,000 KU students and faculty marched peacefully down Jayhawk Boulevard and took part in workshops on ending the war. By the end of the decade, there was a marked increase in violence in Lawrence. Between March 1968 and September 1969, there had been at least 40 fires from arson or firebombing, resulting in more than $200,000 in property damage. The appearance of strange new faces in Lawrence led many locals to blame these acts of violence on, quote, outsiders, the hippies, freaks, and street people that claim part of the town as their own. Indeed, the growth of the counterculture was an important factor in this experience for Lawrence and contributed to the polarization. One street person remarked that Lawrence was, quote, a friendly place for wayward freaks, like the Orion Trail for hippies. Another claimed that Lawrence was, quote, a very small colony of gentle hippies smoking grass. By 1970, however, that appeared to have changed. The talk of revolution was taken serious by many young radicals, some who lived among the other freaks and street people in Orion, a neighborhood that abutted the university's northern and eastern boundaries and formed the core of the city's diverse counterculture. A block-long strip running from the north parking kiosk to where today stands the Oriad Hotel was the heart of youth radicalism, and to where were attracted serious radicals, fun and thrill seekers, and curious voyeurs. A number of older homes have become student communes, including the infamous White House on the west side of the street. The Gaslight Tavern and the Rock Chalk Cafe were gathering places for Lawrence's street people. Not surprisingly, old stock Lawrenceans did not welcome the street people, whom they saw as threats to their own children and values. Ironically, many of the street people were their own children. The strain from years of cultural, racial, and social conflict exploded in 1970, beginning in April and culminating in July, with a 2-week spree of violence, which has become known as the Days of Rage. By mid-April, Lawrence seemed headed for armed confrontation. Guns, explosives, and other weapons flowed freely into and within the community. The street people and black radicals were stockpiling weapons, as were the self-proclaimed rednecks and vigilantes. The BSU president encouraged African Americans to arm themselves, affirming that the BSU was, quote, taking responsibility for ensuring the safety of all blacks on the KU campus because of death threats from whites. Nothing, it seemed, concerned white Lawrenceans more than the thought of black men with guns. White vigilante groups already had access to weapons, had weapons and access to more. One vigilante claimed that his group included 300 members in Lawrence and 1,600 backup people. He vowed to use guerrilla warfare to halt the militants. And he said he believed that the, quote, elimination of 14 people would do much to quiet the city. Another declared that, quote, if we don't stop them in East Lawrence, they'll be in West Lawrence. The spread of Black power and the BSU's influence mobilized and united parts of the Black community. Evident the third week of April as Black students at Lawrence High forced their way into Principal William Medley's office. They presented Medley with a list of demands, including the addition of Black history and literature courses and the hiring of 10 new Black teachers. Medley rejected the demands and ordered them back to class, which they ignored. He then called the police, who arrested, among others, Rick Dowdell. 3 days later, Black students gathered in Veterans Park, while white students massed in the high school parking lot. Lawrence police patrolled the school grounds and formed defensive lines. Fistfights erupted between black and white students, resulting in several minor and at least one serious injury. Principal Medley blamed these disturbances, again, quote, on outsiders, specifically the BSU. The high school closed on April 17th, and a special school board meeting to examine the episode was called for April 20th. 1,500 people attended, including more than, quote, 600 tax-paying citizens who said they were tired of racial problems, which they blamed solely on blacks. The black students and their parents later walked out of the meeting. And then later that evening, the high school or the district administration building was firebombed. To make matters worse, that same night, a multi-million-dollar arson consumed the KU Student Union. It's highly likely that the high school problems and the Union fire were connected. The next day, Kansas Governor Robert B. Docking placed the city under a dusk to dawn curfew that he extended for 2 additional nights. Arson and fire bombings increased during the curfew, including another fire at Lawrence High. Frequently, snipers shot at firefighters responding to calls. The curfew shocked many Lawrencians, alarmed at what they believed was a flagrant disregard for law and order and the breakdown of moral authority. One businessman had spent the first night of the curfew at his business with his fire extinguisher and shotgun. Like others, he was getting, quote, tired, damn tired, of lawlessness and the destruction of property, which was not an answer to our civil rights problem. Quote, law and order must be respected in return, he said. The Union fire seemed to be a sign to radicals, moderates, and conservatives alike that the revolution was indeed underway in Lawrence. For many, the Union fire was the logical conclusion of what they perceived as the nation's toleration of political and cultural radicalism. The Kansas Bureau of Investigation believed that the fire bombings and arson were the work of militant weathermen and the Black Panthers, who they said appeared to be testing, quote, the efficiency of the police and National Guard. The situation further deteriorated in May, especially in the aftermath of the deaths of students at Kent State University in Ohio and Jackson State University in Mississippi. On May 7th, at least 200 people pelted the military science building with rocks, breaking windows. The Kansas Highway Patrol sent additional troopers to relieve weary Lawrence police. The National Guard stationed watchmen in most of its armories, including Lawrence's, which is only a few blocks from the southwest edge of campus. 100 students blocked Iowa Street before police in riot gear dispersed them. 500 demonstrators gathered in front of Strong Hall and demanded that the campus be shut down. I believe this is a photograph from one of the ROTC disruptions. Yeah. The community had precariously escaped serious violence in April and May. There were no deaths, only minor injuries, and apart from the Union arson, minimal property damage. The town would not be so lucky in July. Fire bombs and vandalism had destroyed thousands, millions, I think if you include the Union. Snipers shot out street lights and took pot shots at officers, police officers, firefighters, and ordinary citizens, including, I believe, Hank Booth and Dolph Simons in South Park. White vigilantes threatened to restore order in their own way. The governor proclaimed a state of emergency, again sent the highway patrol to relieve the LPD and mobilized the National Guards to keep the peace. Several business owners again guarded their stores with shotguns and rifles and used their weapons in shootouts, allegedly with blacks and the street people. On the night of July 16th, 3 separate incidents of gunfire occurred east of downtown. When Lawrence police officers Kennard Avey and William Garrett responded to the shootings around 10:15, snipers fired at them. The officers reportedly saw 2 people retreat from the area of the shooting and head toward the Afro House, which the BSU had created. There they saw 2 black people drive away in a Volkswagen, which they followed. According to the police report, the driver violated several traffic laws and drove recklessly. The car struck a curb, came to a stop, and the young black male fled the vehicle. Garrett allegedly ordered him to stop and fired a warning shot. Garrett, who claimed the suspect fired back, then squeezed off 3 rounds, one of which hit Rick Tiger Dowdell. He was pronounced dead at the scene. After the shooting, Garrett was temporarily relieved of his duties, pending a coroner's inquest. Later, an all-white panel established for that purpose exonerated him. The KBI affirmed Garrett's and the LPD's recounting of the shooting. The black community rejected that verdict. Dowdell's comrades vowed that his murder would be avenged by any means necessary and threatened to kill anyone that, quote, gets in the way of the total liberation of our people. Similarly, the street people and many KU students felt the same alienation and harassment from police as blacks, and they too were enraged by the shootings. The Vortex, an underground newspaper, published Garrett's photograph with the caption, "Wanted for murder," which enraged Garrett's supporters. George Kimball, who you see here with his arms folded, was a leader of the street people in the anti-war movement who lived in Oriad and promised that, quote, "if the pigs come into our community, there ain't going to be any dead on our side." The situation was ripe for further tragedy. Over the next several nights, snipers shot out car windows and street lights and continued to fire at firefighters and police officers. A police officer was allegedly wounded in a gun battle with blacks near the Afro House. The highway patrol came back into town and claimed this was the work of the street people in retaliation for Rick Dowdell's death. In Oriad on July 20th, the street people opened the fire hydrants and set a car on fire. The police attempted to disperse the crowd by firing into the throng. Amid the confusion, Nick Rice lay bleeding in the street, dying of a gunshot wound to the head. Another student was wounded, although not fatally. Nick was carried to the gaslight, but police fired tear gas into the building, which ran Nick's rescuers out of the structure. By all accounts, Rice was an innocent victim. He was not a radical, had not had previous encounters with the police, nor had he been involved in the altercations that led to the police being called to the area. The following day, Governor Docking declared a state of emergency and prohibited the purchase, sale, or use of weapons and ammunition or flammable materials. Nick Rice's death generated much more indignation from the greater Lawrence community than did Rick Dowdell. Outrage came exclusively from the black community or the radical fringe when Tiger was killed. Some whites even justified the killing. An Oriad business owner expressed, quote, gratitude and sympathy to police wounded by sniper fire and praised the courageous action of the police officer who killed who fired the shot that killed Dowdell. A downtown merchant claimed he, quote, did not like killing, but if it's going to take some killing to get the job done and return Lawrence to normal, then I say let's get on with it. The town settled down into August, although there continued to be scattered bursts of violence through the rest of 1970 into the next couple of years, but never matching the level of what occurred in April and July. Some might want to argue that the summer of 1970 in Lawrence was the result of outsiders coming to town and stirring up trouble. I don't think that's the case. What I believe is that what happened that summer was indigenous to the community, informed, no doubt, by larger events taking place across the country. I, for one, am heartened by the city's decision to enact these markers, even if it took 56 years to do so. In my mind, Lawrence is owning its past, acknowledging the tragic deaths and the circumstances that created the conditions in which these two young men died. The city isn't trying to erase the past and pretend 1970 never happened. Given current times, I think it's a lesson we should all take to heart. Thank you.
I mentioned earlier that we started down this path with actually the brother of Nick Rice going to the Lawrence City Commission and asking that some type of marker be dedicated to his brother to recognize his death and the events that took place during 1970. I don't think Chris Rice had any idea what he started. The great thing, and something that every Lawrenceian should be thankful to Chris for, is when he submitted that letter to the Lawrence City Commission, the city recognized that we didn't really have a system to look at events in history and even erect markers. You know, who was going to pay for them? What were they going to look like? Did we just take everybody's request? Do you have something? And we really didn't have a system set up for that. At the same time, we had a group of individuals who wanted to do some type of marker at the pool, which you just heard about was such a significant site in Lawrence's history and quest for equality of the races. So the city commission decided that yes, we did need some type of marker program, and certainly that these two markers, which started out as one marker, went to 5 and then back down to 2, a process to do that. So I'm very thankful to Chris for starting us down this road, because now we do have a group that is working on a rubric for what types of markers we want to see in Lawrence. These two markers are the prototype. They're a little bit different than the one at the swimming pool that's already been erected, which I would encourage you to go check out if you haven't seen that one. During this time frame, the city also looked at doing markers for the lynchings that took place in Lawrence, and Carrie can tell you a little bit about those if you would in a few minutes. And then a marker for Margaret Vinegar, who was also part of that lynching story. And so we're moving forward looking at our history holistically, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that one day Tom Harper was on his morning walk and realized that we used to have this little plaque by the Rotary Digester, which many of you may not know, but it was gone. It had just been taken away. And so he started a campaign to do a marker for the rotary digester, which was a piece of equipment used by the Lawrence Paper Company that you can now go and see. It's just a little bit to the south of the parking garage at Riverfront Mall, and I'd encourage you to see that. So while we were working on the Rice marker, we used this same type of format for that marker. And so I'm going to introduce Chris and ask him to tell us a little bit about his story. But I also want to thank him from the community for starting this trail for the city to hopefully have a way to recognize future events in history for the city of Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming. You know, it was interesting reflecting when Rusty was talking about all the international or national events that occurred. And I don't think a lot of young kids now put Kent State into a national perspective, but I think it was the 1st of May when Richard Nixon, then president, decided after watching the movie Patton twice, that he was going to go bombing into Cambodia, chasing. Is that the 1st of May?
Yeah,
I think so.
then.
Yeah. So then, you know, that's what got Kent State going.
Yep.
And that's what, you know,
3
again.
days later was Kent State.
Right. May the 4th was Kent State. So it's interesting. There's a whole web of various things that are involved in that. But by 1970, everybody was pretty darn sick of the Vietnam War, including Lawrencians. Well, anyway, I wanted to thank all those people who have helped me on this journey. Will Hayes and Steve Novak at the Watkins, Connor Mitchell and Mackenzie Clark at the Lawrence Times. Thank you. Historical Commission, especially Lynn Zoller, who kept pushing this thing and negotiating with a lot of various types of people. The City Commission, who courageously voted unanimously to make markers a reality. Max Couch, my legal eagle, and Steve Case, who's been a buddy since grade school. Thank you, Steve. Doug Harvey, who guided me through my journey of discovery through the KU archives and since. Carrie Alterberg, who has spoken up at meetings to remind the city of its moral obligations. And I had a family, when this occurred to our family, there was only my brother and I, so I was left as the only child, but it was devastating to my family, as you can imagine. And I want to shout out to a family called the Grays, which was my mom's sister, who lived in Kansas City, and her husband, and then their children, the Ormsbys, and then the Mellors, who took our family in after this tragedy. Oddly enough, for vacation, for holidays and things, I was walking through yesterday up there at the Watkins, and up there is a picture of Fog Allen talking, talking to a bunch of basketball players. He's on the chalkboard. My uncle is one of them, the Gray. Yeah. And my aunt, who was his wife, was Fog Allen's secretary. So there was a little connection when I went up there, and I took a picture and sent it to my cousin. Uncle's long since passed away. Okay, many others I've forgotten, but I especially want to thank my wife, Jan, who has listened to me rant and rave for over 46 years. Thank you. As you probably know, Nick was an innocent bystander, not involved in any confrontation. He came to town to pay a traffic ticket, which was due the next day. He was a nice, carefree kid working a summer job as a surgical orderly in Kansas City. He was accidentally shot when an aggressive sergeant ordered the 2 officers under his command to open fire on someone attempting to start an overturned Volkswagen on fire, despite tear gas and a crowd in the area. No shout to halt, no warning. One of those officers had just purchased his M1 carbine that day and missed the would-be arsonist, instead striking my brother in the back of the neck. Actually went just below the skull and out through his mouth, paralyzing him immediately and nicked his spinal cord. It is interesting to me that although the sergeant ordered the others to shoot to kill, He later claimed he shot above everyone at a 45 to 60 degree angle. Why would that be? Bystanders' attempts to give him first aid resulted in more tear gas being around because the police thought it was a trick to drag them into a dangerous situation. Eventually, he was dragged, as Rusty said, into a local bar, and the ambulance had to be called back, which was there on the scene earlier, had been told to go away. For whatever reason, they thought it was dying down. So they ended up bringing the ambulance back, but more tear gas was thrown, as Rusty said, in front of the bar and inside. People fled. By the time the ambulance arrived and took Nick to the hospital, he was dead. The cover-up started immediately. One of the officers, just lost everything. One of the officers, at the hospital said, quote, "No matter what happened, the police didn't kill that boy." Another officer identified Nick as the arsonist before recanting his statement, realizing Nick was almost a foot taller with red hair and different clothes. At City Hall, the officer that admitted he fired his gun on the level later practically confessed to his supervisors, "I may have shot that boy." But city officials went into full deflect and deny mode. Later, a bullet was found and then tampered with in such a way to prevent it from being used as evidence. The bullet came from the new M1, purchased that day of Nick's death. Misleading statements by city officials were published in the local paper. Was it some mysterious sniper? A group of concerned citizens took out an ad in the paper showing their support for the police. A month later, a coroner's inquest was held. My folks didn't ask for it, but it served the purpose of attempting to show concern. In one day, a parade of witnesses that the city attorney chose testified. There was an audible gasp from the audience when the officer with the new M1 testified he shot on the level instead of up in the air. Everybody else said they shot up in the air. He was probably the only one telling the truth. My parents filed suit almost 2 years later. They requested a change of venue. It was denied. Worst of all, transcripts of the inquest had been lost. My parents' copy was taken by two men who came to their house and said they were from the FBI. And looking into the case, it was never seen again, that copy. The county was entrusted with the other copy. It is lost. After months of roadblocks and mistakes by their legal team, they gave up and settled for their legal fees, $500. It was not for a lack of evidence, as one former officer recently wrote. They couldn't get the evidence. You can't fight City Hall. You can read all about the details in the manuscript, Truth is Bad Business, which will be hopefully posted on the Watkins website. Let's see. You can also read a shorter version of the award-winning series by the Lawrence Times entitled Who Killed Nick Rice? Or if you want a deep dive, you can go to the Spencer Archives and go through the KBI files, which were hundreds of pages long. Just like in the Dowdell case, 20 pages were missing from that. Even then they were, I hope this marker will educate folks to the truth and encourage them to realize what can happen when a city and county are confronted with an inconvenient truth. The truth is, the city didn't invest in hiring enough qualified police, training and paying them adequately, as the President's Commission later found out and wrote. Today we have body cams and cell phones, so it's much more difficult to mislead people. One last lesson. If you have someone in your life who's important to you, give them a call and let them know, because they can be gone in a flash. Thank you.
Say that you in your quest and learning the things that I've learned from you about love have changed my life. Thank you. Now I would like to ask that Stephen Dowdell from the Dowdell family give us some remarks about Tiger and his family and their quest to have this marker. And I will like to thank Stephen and his brother. They all the stuff that goes on behind you that you don't see, or many Zoom Teams meetings with lots of different faces that you learn people, and I'm very appreciative of all the work and help that y'all gave us throughout this process. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank Steve, and Lynn, and the mayor, and everybody that helped make this possible. Because we worked on it, it's kind of hurt me right now. We worked on this for like 5 years, and I just wanted to have this done. So I didn't believe that Rick, died in vain. That he died for a reason, and the reason was, he wanted the racism stopped in Lawrence, Kansas. So we got the Apple House, and people said that we were just a gang of kids, but we weren't. We was more like, I would consider ourselves as freedom fighters for the blacks. So we would even feed the younger kids that couldn't afford breakfast. We fed them breakfast, and we fed them lunch, and so then after that, we were stopping the police from racial profiling, because they was doing that a lot back then. And so and then we got with the Black Student Union, and we worked together. And I had some friends here that helped establish that. Yeah, 2 friends. And anyways, it's kind of hard because my brother died on the 16th. It's kind of rough for me. Every July. Anyway, there were 7 of us. We grew up on Wisconsin Street, on the Rocky Road. And one day, the police came to our house and said our dog, bit the next door neighbor. And we knew he didn't, but they just didn't like him. So the police called my dad. He told me to bring out the dog. He took out the dog, and the policeman took him. We was all standing on the porch, and they shot my dog in the head. And so then after we left in the car, we seen his brains laying there up in the driveway, and that was my first take on the police. I thought they were just mean and cruel. But then when we grew up, we found out different. But then after a while, when we started to get older, and then we joined the movement. Because my father, and he left us, and he went to Seattle, and my mother died when I was 13. So just left me and my brothers. I helped raise them. And there were some times that we didn't have no food, no light, no electricity. And believe it or not, we lived and ate off of cake batter just to survive. We searched through dumpsters just to get food. And we would ask friends for food. Sometimes we would take groceries out of people's cars when they would leave and before they came back. And that was the first time that they took me to court, and the judge asked me, why did you do that? And I said, because I was hungry, and he dropped the case. Because he said that nobody should go hungry in So then after that, then my grandmother and she raised me and my, brothers. But before that, I took care of my brothers, when we were real young, and I had two younger brothers at the time, and they were small, babies. I took care of them by myself, I changed their diaper, fed them their bottles and everything, warmed them up. So I had to take care of the house. And so I couldn't hardly sleep because I had to protect my brothers, and we had a house that didn't have no screens, and we kept the windows up, all summer because we didn't have an air conditioner. And so through all that, I made it, and I'm just glad I'm here. There was one time in my life I thought I wouldn't live to see 30 because of the life, that I was living. But I just thank God that I'm still here, and I appreciate everything that Lynn and all of them had done for me. And I thank God, for them just making it possible. Because I never did think it was going to happen. But I kept pushing on, and they kept pushing on, and Lynn kept calling me and sending me texts, and we just stayed on it, and here I am today, being honored with my brother Rick. And I say it again, it didn't die in vain. But as I grew older, I found the Lord, changed my whole life around. And then I became a deacon. Now I'm a deacon at 9th Street Missionary Baptist Church. I have some members here right now that are here, and I appreciate them for coming. I appreciate everybody here. I'm just overwhelmed. I didn't have a list, I didn't have nothing to say on a piece of paper like Rice, because it was hard for me to even try to write something down because it was hurting me so much because of this month. This month has always bothered me for almost all my life. I'm 78 years old now. Yeah, I just had surgery 2 weeks ago. It's hard for me to get around, but I had to come. I had to be here. Even if I had to crawl, I was going to come here. And I'll leave you with this. Racism is still rampant. Racism is like a cancer. It keeps eating up on us. And we need to realize that racism most likely will never stop. It'll probably be here the rest of our lives. But I'm saying this is what I'm saying. I said, I used to say I hated white people. But I changed my mind on that because there are some good white people, just like there's some good black people. And I know there were some good white people because during the slavery, some of them hid them out. So I know that we can do, better in this world, but I just pray to God that one day we wipe out racism.
And like I said to Chris, I want you to know from me personally your life has touched me, and there will never be another July where I don't think of your brother. And I hope that people, as they see these markers and as the link to the Watkins online museum
Exhibit.
it's going to be bigger, but okay, that people will learn, and it will make this trail that you've led have purpose. And I appreciate all your help in helping us get to this point. And I hope, one of my hopes for the QR code and the online exhibit that the Watkins is going to host, and when Steve and I get together is really bad because we're like, oh, we could do this, we could do this, we could do this. One of the things that we would like to do is have oral interviews available as part of this exhibit. And I hope you'll consider doing that for us in the future to be part of this exhibit. So just a quick note about the QR code. It is a work in progress. It's starting with an exhibit that the Watkins had already done on the Days of Rage. And we will be adding Chris Rice's document that is thoroughly researched, and an incredible document will be there. And we will also have links if you haven't had the opportunity to read Connor Mitchell's series in the Lawrence Times. I would highly encourage you to do that. It's very informative. And one day when I was sitting at my desk, and you know, I live by email as most of us do these days, and I got an email from this gentleman who said, hey, if you need any help with the Rice and Dowdell markers, let me know. I will help. And his name was Kerry. And he was working on the lynching marker and the Margaret Vinegar marker, but he also took this on and has helped us get to this end. And I would like to introduce him, and he's going to tell you a little bit about the two other events we have scheduled.
Thank you, Lynn. Talk about having to follow up. Well, Lawrence is facing its history. I didn't know that it would for a long time, but it is. The last few years, we've erected a marker on the 1882 lynching of 3 black men, and another marker for one of those black men's daughter who was mistreated and sent to jail and died in prison because of racism. We also have recently put 30 granite markers at Potter's Field in Oakville Cemetery for the graves of 30 black Lawrence people, who all different levels of society, who didn't have their markers. There are over probably 1,100 people buried in Potter's Field, and before we had these markers there were less than 10 markers. So that's all good. But it's not enough, because this story, yeah, Tiger and Nick, has been, I don't know if festering's the right word, but it's been eating at Lawrence for a long time. And now it's finally being addressed and not celebrated, but commemorated. The actual markers, the text of the boards are over here if you haven't already seen it. The hardware has been installed at the 2 sites, just waiting for these to be installed in the next couple of days by city staff. There will be a unveiling of Tiger's marker on this coming Thursday at 7 p.m. The marker site is on the grounds of the former Salvation Army store on the north side of 10th Street, just east of New Hampshire Street. I hope everyone can come. It won't be a long meeting. It's going to be hot that night, and there's no air conditioning outdoors. But it will be the culmination of that story. And then Monday, a week from tomorrow, the 20th, there will be the dedication, the unveiling of Nick Rice's marker. That will be done up on Oriot Avenue, across from where he died. It will be along Oriot Avenue in the 1200 block of Oriot Avenue on the east side of the street, just north of the Jayhawk Welcome Center. I invite you to come to that too. That won't be the end of the story. The story will continue. It will never go away now because it's now not only part of Lawrence history, it's part of Lawrence's recognition of that history. Thank you.
And my final closing remark, I know healing was mentioned in the press release, and that's something that I hope we can all embrace. And I would be remiss if I didn't say that the city commissions that I've worked under during the quest to have these markers created and installed has been super supportive. They have done everything that you would want your city government to do to support you on hard history, and that doesn't happen in every community. And so I know it's a time where, you know, sometimes we don't feel like the city commission listens or the big guys out to get everybody, but I do want to tell you that it has been my experience over the last 5 years as we've worked on these markers to have incredible support from the city of Lawrence through this quest to make it a reality finally, and then hopefully carry it forward in the future with the QR code and the Watkins Museum of History.
We're already adding to that page.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
So check out the website, come to the marker unveilings, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for your presentation. Good to see you again. Good to see you.